Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movement. My flagship year-long online women's circle is called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year, and I work with clients one-on-one. I also started doing stand-up comedy for fun in 2018. So this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and the show also aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. Hello, everybody. This is episode number 329 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto. It is also episode number 4 of our Journey into the Wild Soul this year. And so if you are just popping in, if you're not familiar with the journey, I do this every year around this time to wrap up with focus and intention. So what we do is we take a look at your inner world from all these different angles and perspectives to make sure that you can have the best possible outer world experience. Because truly, being a human is absolutely no joke. And if you're someone who's on a spiritual path, you probably realize that, living in the spiritual realms, spiritual practice, it's so nourishing, it's so healing, it feels so good. But then where the real practice comes, when the rubber meets the road, is when you have to go back into your life. You have to deal with people you wouldn't necessarily want to deal with, or situations or unexpected things that could be really hard, or grief or stress. And so this is about how do we navigate all the things that we each have to navigate day in and day out with as much grace and acceptance and love and joy as possible. And it all is possible. So our theme this year is wholeness. And what I also want to remind you is that this isn't about just reflecting on the year or just the previous year in your life, previous years. We're going into a new decade, so this is also a great opportunity to really reflect on what the past 10 years have been like. Certainly from an appreciation perspective, like you have come a long way no matter what. There still might be some things in your life that were there 10 years ago that you're still working out. It's okay. Nothing to beat yourself up about. So we're here really. What better energy to use than going into a new decade, right? Or what better way, rather, to use that energy? There is better energy to use. But what better way to use the energy and momentum of going into a new decade than to go, all right, what could stay in the 2010s, right? What do I want to take into the 2020s with me? What really needs to go? And so throughout all these episodes, I'm giving you all these different ways to look at those things. And again, focus, be intentional, moving forward. What I'm always also doing in this series is inviting you to consider if how you've been going about your growth, healing, and transformation is really effective, or if it's more performative, obligatory, inefficient, ineffective, or for some people, even just a distraction. So, this is about real deal empowerment. And to be clear, I am not out here trying to empower you because I can't do that. But what I can do is help you empower yourself, is to give you the tools, give you the insights, give you practices. So, that's what we're talking about during the 6 week series. And again, we approach it from different angles with the intention of helping you connect to the love and truth inside of you, which ultimately, those two things are your power. Your power is really deeply rooted in love and truth above all else, like your true power. So, we do have a private Facebook group. If you are having insights and you want to share some things and be part of some group discussions, you can get the link to that by going to wildsoulmovement.com/journey 2020. People have been sharing some really amazing things, which, as always, in a group setting, sometimes someone shares, it sparks an insight for someone else that they wouldn't have had otherwise on their own. We've also got some people in there who are just connecting with folks who live in their own areas, making some wild soul friends. So if you're craving some community, go on over to wildsoulmovement.com/journey 2020 and get yourself in that Facebook group. It is a pop-up. It will close at the end of the year, but we still got a few weeks to go. So knock yourself out if you'd like to join that. Now, if you haven't heard the first 3 episodes, it's okay. You do not have to go back and listen to them before listening to this one. But we do have links on the show notes page, which is untameyourself.com/329 to the other episodes. So you can go check those out as well. So today we're getting into what I call the Arc of Power, and that is a curriculum that I've been developing since 2013 that I apply specifically in my year-long Women's Circle Power. And I used it for many years before I made the Women's Circle specifically a year and wanted to have it in a year-long container. And at the end of this episode today, you are going to hear from one of my former students, one of my alumni, about why the year was such a valuable length of time for her. One of the things she shared is that she had done a lot of different programs that were like 7 weeks or 12 weeks. And she makes a really good point that there's only so much you can get done in that period of time. As well, I used to also run the program self-paced. And what I noticed is it's great to let people go at their own pace, which I was inclined to do that because I want people to have their own experiences. I have no interest in being dogmatic, in being a guru, in being like this kind of person who tells people this is the way to do it. I'm much more interested in giving people some framework and a container and allowing them to do their own exploration where I could be their guide when they need it. That's just my preference. But a lot of people, and when in the go at your own pace container, would quit, right? Because there was no driving energy holding them accountable to move forward. So finally last year, for the first time, I did it in a year-long container. And the number of people that have been able to see it through has been much higher. The experience has been much deeper. There's really been something to going through with other people that has helped people move through differently and have incredible results. So the arc of power in the year-long container looks like we spend a quarter or a season on each topic. And the 4 topics are surrender and release, trust and receptivity. It used to be wild dreaming and desire, but for 2020, I'm shifting it to passion and purpose. And I'll explain more about why I'm making that choice in next week's episode. And then the final topic is love and truth. And it's an arc because growth is not linear. But having a path to follow really, really helps. And that's what the arc creates for people. It's also something that people can journey on back and forth over the course of time. They could always revisit different things and reach back. And it's not a circle because part of it is meeting you where you are, starting at a ground level and grounding you in each time you journey through the arc, right? So the circle just keeps going and going. So there's something about the arc having like a beginning point and an ending point. And then if you choose to do the arc again or go back to a different point in the arc, that's totally up to you. But it's not linear, but it's also not circular. And I think mainly because we're never starting back at the beginning, right? Because once you go through the arc, you're never going back to the same beginning. You might begin again. So the symbolism of the arc to me is something that people can begin over and over and over again and be met where they are as many times as they want to. And these specific topics will always be relevant, no matter where someone is on their journey, how new they are, how advanced someone is. But they can always pick up a spot on the arc and begin again, which is what I really like about the symbolism of the arc. So this coming year, Empower, even more than other years, I'm going to be focusing on leaving the past in the past when we do this first section, surrender and release. And we start with surrender and release because we are all carrying so much. Like I said earlier, being human is absolutely no joke. So we are all carrying so much all the time that if we're going to make room for anything new, we literally need to make room. We can't just keep piling more on to what we're already carrying or what we're already holding without clearing some things out and without having some practices for giving things up that are just out of our hands. So think of it, the metaphor I always use is like if you're moving or if you downsize, you might need to get rid of some furniture, right? Or if you are redecorating, you can't just keep everything that you have and then bring in the new stuff. You're going to have to get rid of some of the old stuff to make space for the new. And this is very similar in our lives on all kinds of levels, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. So we need to learn how to work with our emotions and thoughts so that they don't run us. And so also that they don't congest us. You know, it's funny, I'm using the word congestion. You could probably hear it in my voice. I'm a little congested today. And, in order to breathe fully, I got to clear out my sinuses. And so in order for you to feel fully, to think clearly and to the fullness of your capacity and intellect, which is vast, right? You need to clear out the stuff that's emotionally congesting you, that's mentally congesting you. Often people have physical, like digestive issues. In order to be able to take in the nutrients that you need to clean out your digestive system sometimes. So this applies to like every area of life. If you are wanting a new or a different experience or a better experience in some cases, you got to do some cleaning up first. So that's why release is part of this first topic. And then the reason why surrender is part of the first topic is because for a lot of people, in order to release, one of the biggest things they're needing to release is control. And surrender is one thing in the arc of power. The other thing is trust, which I'll talk about in a little while. Surrender is one thing in the arc of power that's really the opposite of control, right? Because when we're controlling, what are we doing? We're trying to manipulate, cajole, coerce. We are trying to tightly grasp to all the details and orchestrate things to go the way we want them to go. Because either we think that there's only one right way for it to go, or we just don't want to deal with any pain or discomfort if it doesn't go the way that we deem to be correct. But this is the human experience, y'all. There are so many potential and possible outcomes and so many factors and variables in every single tiny little detail of every single little thing. So if we are living our lives trying to control everything, and so rigid in our concepts and our ideas and our beliefs, how we think things should be and how we think things should go, it's going to be a very limited life. And there is a lot available to you that you miss out if you don't have a practice of surrender, right? You have to surrender all things all the time, but getting into the practice of going, this is too much for me. I cannot do all of this on my own. I have to give some of it up. I have to give some of it over. And here's the deal. Surrender, when I say give it up, I mean the stuff, right? The attachment, the holding the heavy energy of things. I do not mean give up on the thing. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do need to realize and be discerning. That comes more with trust when we want to walk away from something, when we want to cut our losses, and that is appropriate. But surrender isn't about like waving a white flag. Surrender is not about quitting. Surrender comes from wisdom. Surrender is a choice that creates space and freedom and makes other things and other options possible. makes better solutions accessible. In some cases, it makes a solution that is better for more parties involved accessible rather than just a solution that's good for some. So surrender can be a really powerful, really important, really clarifying, cleansing process. And then releasing, of course, happens on so many different layers and levels and requires time. It's fairly rare that we ever just spontaneously release things. And if and when that happens, I personally believe that that is an act of grace. I don't think that that just happens by sheer will alone. I think temporarily we could do it by sheer will alone, but we don't get it out at the roots. We rarely release something all the way down to its roots just at the drop of a hat. It takes layers, it takes time, it takes a lot of self-acceptance, forgiveness, and gentleness. And so I do want to talk about the word forgiveness here for a moment, and even release in the same context, because releasing and letting things go, and also forgiving, which is part of release, which is a form or a release practice. And some of you who've been listening to the show for a while have heard me say this in many, many different ways because it's really important. You can trust that I am never, ever encouraging anyone to force themselves to be okay with something that happened that is not okay. Anything that's been a violation of your person, of your dignity, of your humanity, or anyone else's is not okay. So releasing and forgiving is never about being okay with something that happened. It is, though, about releasing the energy or shifting the energy around how you are relating to the thing in a way that gives you more space and freedom in your life, less burden, less suffering, less pain, less attachment. So what comes to mind here is, if you think about relationships, because almost everybody can relate to this in a relationship context, breakups are hard, right? Whether it's a breakup in a romantic context or a breakup with a friendship that you move on from, or sometimes some people break up with family members and they move on. So a break in any kind of relationship where you are moving beyond being in relationship with a person is hard. Even if you're the one who wanted it, it's hard because there are so many things baked into our relationships that are also attached to what we think is going to be our future, what the unfolding of our life might look like. Often when a person is part of that vision and then they are not, that's going to be hard, even if you're the one who decided it would be better if they weren't. So one way to deal with things like that is to harp on it, right? It's to replay in your mind what happened, what could have gone differently, what if they were different, what if you were different, what if this thing didn't happen or that didn't occur, right? And we can focus on all these things, again, that we cannot control or do anything about because they've already happened. And that is torture. That is really a solid way to torture yourself for a very long time and to feel a lot of pain and to stay stuck in the pain of where you are, and also to not be energetically, mentally, or emotionally available for a different or a new experience, or for someone to come in and replace what was lost, right? And not necessarily replace like a swap, but to come in and fill that space in a different way that might fulfill whatever vision or goals or dreams that you have in a different way. And it might look different, right? Like I'm sure so many of you are sitting right now with something in your life that you're just like, this is not how I thought it would be. I think of a dear friend of mine who's a single mom. And this is one of her things that I know she bumps into. She didn't expect to be in her 40s, parenting predominantly on her own and going through these big life experiences without a partner. It's just not what she envisioned for herself. But she's doing it. And so she's dealing with it, And so having practice around surrender and release helps us to deal with these heavy things that we carry: guilt, grief, resentment, anger, big emotions in a lot of cases. In some cases, it's ideas and thoughts. regrets in some cases, grudges in some cases. So I just want you to take a moment to consider if you have any of those things in your life right now, what would it be like without them? And you know what? For some people, those things have become part of their identity. And so the idea of letting it go feels like very disorienting because they don't know who they would be without their grudges, without their regrets, without beating themselves up every day. They don't know what dialogue would go in place if that wasn't the conversation happening, right? And grief is so tender. I recently did an interview on my friend Christina Rasmussen's Dear Life podcast, and we talked about the connection between embodiment and grief. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes because I'm not going to dig into that too much here. But grief, I believe, is one of the most exquisite emotions and experiences that we get to have as humans because it shapes and molds us, it softens us, it tenderizes us, it pulverizes us. But on the other side of it, what we become available for, the resiliency, what we're capable of, the capacity is absolutely beautiful. It's stunning. And if you are a person who's dealt with a lot of grief for whatever reason in your life, right? There's so many different things that cause grief. Who grief can shift you into, I mean, it could really destroy you or it can create you into a totally new person. Sometimes it destroys you first and then creates you into a totally new person. So this is why we do surrender and release. And if you've downloaded my embodiment Bible, which if you haven't, you can get it by going to wildsoulmovement.com/embodiment-challenge. That's where you'll be able to get it through the end of the year. And then we'll create a new link for it next year. But the 4 concepts I included in the embodiment Bible were softening, observing, feeling, and naming. And during the embodiment challenge, I specifically focused the practices on softening, observing, and feeling because we can feel our feelings without analyzing them. And not only can we, but we really should. People should all have, I don't use the word should a lot, but when it comes to this, I know this to be true because I see it year in and year out in my work and also in my life. It has created so much freedom and ease and joy for me to be able to feel our feelings without analyzing them. Right? Because we create things in our life. Often we make things much harder, much worse than they actually need to be. And so when you can have a practice, and this is what surrender and release does for you, of allowing yourself to feel whatever you feel without attaching meaning to it, without making up stories about it, or feeling like you need to excavate it and analyze it. If there is something that does need to be excavated or analyzed, it will linger and you will know, right? So surrender and release also takes some real patience. They help us establish the line between how we engage with the world in ways that are useful, productive, and help us move forward, and ways that keep us anchored into the past, the pain, the wounding, the suffering, and keep us either stuck, spinning, or in inertia, or again, moving forward. I did an embodiment video on Instagram last week. At the time I'm filming this, it was last week. Someone had shared something with me that really pissed me off. Like, it's very rare that anything actually pisses me off that much anymore. Like, this derailed my whole day. But here's the thing I've learned about anger. Anything that makes you that angry, there's some gold to be mined in that anger. So I used my own practices. I had to first of all, move it through my body, right? The intensity sometimes is why we don't want to feel our feelings, why we don't want to release, right? But the release occurs when it comes to feelings and emotions in letting ourselves feel them all the way through. And that's not something that I could get into fully in a podcast episode, but that is one of the reasons why we spend 3 whole months, January, February, and March, on surrender and release in the year-long Power Women's Circle. So being able to move through it, and then on the other end, once the intensity of the feelings subsided, I was able to see what was there for me that I could actually take action on. I could use that energy, right? So all that intensity, that's energy. Those feelings and those emotions, that's energy. And once we let the emotional content go, the energy is still there. And we can go, all right, now let me let this be a catalyst. What can this spark? What can I do with this? What action might I be able to take one way or another? So we can't talk about release without talking about forgiveness. And I mentioned it briefly, but I want to just say it again. Forgiveness, I've seen many different definitions of forgiveness. I love the one that says forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. The purpose of forgiveness, as I mentioned earlier, is to shift the energy around how we relate to a thing. For some, it's about taking your power back from a person or from an experience. For some, it's about finally coming to the acceptance and out of the denial that something really did happen and had a very final impact on you or on your life or on people you love in some way, right? And there's no judgment. Here's what I love about forgiveness. A lot of people who have like a religious background really resist forgiveness because they have been taught like forgive and forget. But I don't believe in forgive and forget at all. Like actual forgiveness that's really potent and effective and healing integrates, not forgets, right? It integrates what happened. It creates an awareness. It creates consciousness. It helps you to see things in ways that you wouldn't have if the thing hadn't happened that you're needing to do the forgiveness work around. And it makes you wise to not repeat things or to not maybe fall into similar patterns or situations again. Because when you fully forgive, you fully acknowledge what happened. Forgiveness is not a bypass. And I think some people, why they resist it is because it's been presented to them as a bypass. Oh, you need to forgive that person. Just let it go. Listen, when we talk about letting go and when we talk about forgiveness here, we are getting all up in the thing. We are mining for all of the healing juice, the education, the experience, and anything that we can integrate from it to use it to fertilize the soil of our lives and then move on. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about forgiveness. You do not experience awful things for nothing. I cannot believe that. I cannot exist in this world and believe that anything horrific happens to anyone unless, I'm not saying everything happens for a reason. I'm saying without there being some usefulness to it eventually, right? What I'm also saying is I refuse to have any of the horrendous things that have happened to me be for nothing. So through forgiveness, through release, through surrender, I prefer, and what I teach my people is to make good use of those things one way or another. And again, that takes time. It takes more time than people would prefer. And so even spending 3 whole months on surrender and release in the Power Women's Circle is not enough. But what occurs there is not that you become perfect at surrender and release or that you release absolutely everything in your life that needs to be released. What occurs is that you get the practice of surrender and release going so that through the rest of your life, as things are happening or coming up, you can face them. You can face them with confidence. You know what to do. You know how to handle it. Your resilience is higher and you just don't get bowled over by things the way that you used to. So the second part of the first half of the arc, and it really does occur in like 2 parts, right? The first part is about allowing, right? So surrender and release, and then comes trust and receptivity. And we're only focusing on this first half, the allowing half, right? The wild dreaming and desire and love and truth, that's about expanding. And then the whole thing is about evolution and embodiment. So allowing is the ultimate opposite of control. Allowing is like being in this divine dance with life where you are trusting in the divine unfoldment of things, where you're not clinging to anything too tightly that you're making yourself or others miserable, or again, limiting the infinite possibilities that are available to you. It's also about accessing the parts of you that need to be integrated to serve the fullest vision for your life and the fullest version of your life, not only for you to be content, happy, fulfilled, successful, or whatever else you desire, but to also reach and meet your potential. We do not reach and meet our potential without learning how to trust ourselves and without learning how to be receptive. Okay, so let's talk about trust for a minute. I talk about self-trust a lot. And in power, we primarily focus on self-trust, but if you're working on self-trust, you're going to have to be also looking at how interactions with other people impact the way that you trust yourself and also the way that you trust life. Like, it is a fundamental belief to trust that life in some way, shape, or form is always working on your behalf, right? A lot of people don't want to hear that when hard shit is happening. And what I said earlier is really what I mean. It's a way to go, okay, well, if this thing is happening, let me make this thing useful, right? That is an empowered approach to look at things. And again, we can accept it being like, listen, if this is going to be how it is, at least right now, let me make it useful, right? We're accepting it. Doesn't mean we want it. Doesn't mean that we're okay with it or even that we like it. We can still want to change it, but we can accept it. That requires a level of trust that it wouldn't be happening if it wasn't meant to serve in some way, shape, or form at some point, right? And I'm sure you can think of a myriad of things in your life that have happened that, of course, you wouldn't have chosen. Of course, you wouldn't wish on anyone else, but has shaped the person who you are right now and has helped you to do something, whether it's help yourself or heal or help someone else or translate that into something that you do that helps other people, even if it's just one other person. Gave you knowledge or awareness or an education that you can now share so other people don't have to deal with what you dealt with. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about trusting in. So when we learn how to trust ourselves, we learn how to develop the discernment. We learn how to access our yeses, our nos, and our truth. And if you were listening to last week's embodiment episode, I talked about how I would get into this a little bit more this week. It's really important to know, what does yes feel like in your body? What does no feel like in your body? And what does truth feel like in your body? Truth is resonance. When something resonates for you, there's something there for you, right? When something gives you goosebumps or makes you cry or just gets your attention or gives you chills or, resonance everyone experiences resonance differently, though some people might have similarities. It's just a way of life. It's like, I call this learning to speak your body's unique language of the senses. This is life's way of communicating with you to go, hey, pay attention to this. This is important for you. There's some gold here for you. I always like to think of things like gold. So one of the things I've learned over the years, though, is that it's more important to connect with your no before you connect with your yes. And there is a popular piece of advice out there. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no, that isn't the best because, and I mentioned this in last week's episode, especially if you have any unresolved trauma in your system, some things that resonate for you as yes or safe or familiar, might not actually be good for you. It might be resonating for you that way because you're just used to it and it's resonating with you on the level of your trauma, not on the level of your healed self. But the no's are always relevant. So connecting in with what is a no for you, what does a no feel like in your body? When you don't want to do something, what does that feel like? And some people will get all in there and want to like really overcomplicate and be like, well, what if it's just resistance? If it is just resistance, here's the thing. I wholeheartedly believe, and people share this online all the time. You've heard me say it before. I will say it again and again and again until my last breath. What is for you cannot pass by you. If something is really meant for you, you won't miss out on it. It might have to circle back, right? It might be not now, but you cannot miss out. You just can't miss out on things that are for you. So things that don't work out were not for you. End of story, right? This is something that if you don't have to believe me if you don't want to, but choosing that perspective and choosing to trust in that frees up so much mental and emotional and energetic real estate for you. I don't even know how to describe it for you because I've been living that way for so many years and helping other people live that way. It just creates so much more trust, right? We can trust in the timing of life. And so if you believe that what is for you cannot pass by you, even if something is resistance, it's okay to say no to it. Because then what you stop doing when you just trust your no is you stop friggin' manipulating yourself into being okay with things that you're not okay with in the moment. Because listen, resistance is a no right now. And sometimes it's useful to just briefly be like, okay, is there anything under this that's obvious? I am all about seeing what might be obvious. And if there's not, just let it be a no. Actually, just this morning, at the time I'm recording this, I got an email from someone who was doing my embodiment challenge, and she wasn't really resonating with the way I was guiding the practice. And I sent her a note back to be like, listen, this could be a form of resistance. I've heard this from people before. It might be like your own thoughts and your own mental chatter. If there was more space, you'd be able to focus in and drop in. So just try it a couple more times if you want to and see if it's resistance or it just really might not, my style just might not be for you. And that's totally cool. Let it be a no. Let it be not for you if it's not for you, you know? So learning how to trust in these things and identifying what is a no, that's the place to start, right? Like, obviously, again, we spent 3 whole months on trust and receptivity. Trust is a lifelong thing that people work on. So in one podcast episode, I can't get all up in all the nitty gritty layers and details to trust, but it's just super important. You develop discernment. Trust is about discernment. Discernment requires context. It requires looking at the complexity of things, looking at the layers and levels of things. And that's why discernment is not the same thing as judgment, because judgment happens in the mind. Judgment is the mind evaluating something. And there's good judgment. That's fine. But I prefer to work with discernment because that's coming from the deepest truth, because that's coming from the truth of the body, right? Discernment is really just yes or no. Yes or no. Does this resonate for me? Does this not resonate? Is there dissonance here? Is there resonance here? Am I a yes to this? Am I a no to this? That's it. We also save, again, mental, emotional, and energetic space by not friggin' needing to analyze it. You know, when I know I'm a no to something, I'm like, great, I don't even need to explain it. I'm a no, thank you. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. It feels so good. Think of how much time you spend explaining yourself. And then sometimes people don't receive it anyway, or they want to like change your mind. Sometimes people take an explanation as an invitation to change your mind. When you're just clear on your no, it's just a no. And then, and I said this last week, but let me say it again, and you could probably relate. When you know someone is connected and trusting themselves and they say no to you, you know they mean it. And when you know that someone means no, you also know when they actually mean yes. Because a lot of people are people pleasers. A lot of people say yes when they mean no. And so it's a really cool thing that when people can trust your no, they know they can trust your yes. And then we don't have to do all these games that people play. Well, did she really mean that? All that stuff. Such a waste of time. Now, before I get into receptivity and wrap up the show, I want to go back to this point that I made. I brushed over it, so I want to dig in a little bit more about your potential, how surrender and release and trust and receptivity really help you to reach and meet your potential. And I'm going to give you a story to demonstrate how and why this is. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's a really brilliant, powerful, very talented woman. And she said something to me that immediately registered for me as false. It was along the lines of thinking that she is more gifted and more talented than most people. And the conversation we were having was about how do we responsibly use our own power. And so that this was something that she was navigating. And she was just acknowledging that, like, it really feels like that feels true to her, that she's much more gifted and talented than most people. And I responded to her by sharing that I didn't think that was true. And I wasn't knocking her gifts or talents. But my perspective was that I think all people are immensely gifted and talented. Everyone, every single one. If you're listening to this right now, you are immensely gifted and talented. And some people, for a variety of factors and reasons, are just accessing and using and expressing their gifts and talents more than others. And so we perceive that those people have more talent or are more gifted because we are just seeing more of the expression of their gifts and talents. Whereas other people aren't accessing. They don't know. Like, first you have to know what your gifts and talents are. right? At some point, like think of any famous singer that you love. At some point in their life, they opened their mouth and started singing, and someone was like, damn, that's really good. Or like an athlete, started doing something and someone was like, oh my goodness, look at you go. You know, someone went to draw or paint or something or whatever it is, or someone went to speak in front of a group of people and they were super comfortable and charismatic and people were like, wow, you're really good at this. And they felt it, right? You feel it. You know when you're good at something, right? Or actually, that's not always true. Sometimes you don't know because it comes so naturally to you. It's like effortless. You can't imagine that this isn't just innate to everybody. So sometimes you actually don't find out until other people are reflecting back to you. Oh my goodness, I can't believe how good you are at that. So some people don't know what their talents and gifts are because for whatever reason, they haven't bumped into it yet, or they haven't been in an environment that was safe or supportive enough to express themselves in a way where they would even be able to explore, right? So once you do realize what your gifts and talents are, that's the thing. You're going to need some support in cultivating, in expressing. Then we get into the emotional realm because that takes some real courage. That takes some vulnerability. That takes developing confidence. It also takes resilience and capacity because it will require practice, right? Depending on what your gifts or talents and skills are and how you want to apply them. So my note to my friend was just that she is a person who has been supported in both accessing and cultivating her gifts and talents. And she also has safe spaces and environments in which to express them. And so it's just, she has access and expression. She doesn't have more talent or gifts than other people. And she actually really resonated with it, and it gave her some relief because it was feeling like a burden to her. And if any of you can relate to that feeling like, oh, I have this gift, I need to use it, and then if you're not using it, you're freaking out or feeling pressured. So some people aren't, I will just repeat this one more time to let it sink in, aware of their gifts or talents, or they are, and for whatever reason, they aren't honing or mastering them, practicing them, using them, or expressing them. So I really want you to hear this distinction because you fall somewhere on the spectrum. We all do. You are enormously gifted and talented in your own ways. So are you tapping into your gifts and talents? Are you practicing them? Are you developing any skills or doing any healing you need to do to be able to express them and use them in the world in whatever capacity is appropriate for you? Whether it's to serve others or simply to create and experience more beauty, joy, awe, and connection in your life. Like I talk about my salsa dancing all the time because it brings me so much joy. I'm a really good dancer. And I don't need to do anything with that other than go social dancing a couple nights a week, go to a couple salsa festivals a couple times a year, and just have some joy and community and connection. I get so much out of that. I don't need to perform. Whenever I see people performing, I'm like, oh my God, that would be my nightmare. I have no desire. Learning choreography takes the joy just right out of it for me. But some people, they want that. They want to be in the spotlight. They want to use their skills in that way. And that's amazing. So to each their own on that one. But what I'm saying here and why I'm bringing up that example is because whether you use your gifts and talents in a professional context or just for pure enjoyment and fulfillment in your own life, either has an immeasurable ripple effect. And I really believe this about all humans. This is why in Wild Soul Movement, everything we say, everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. Most of our issues are actually not issues of enoughness. It's access to our wholeness. I really want you to let that sink in. You know how many people feel, and you could probably relate because you probably have felt it at some point, that they weren't enough? It's a huge thing. The issue has never been that you aren't enough. It's been access to your wholeness, to all your parts, light, dark, amazing, ugly, good, bad, all of the parts. This is why the arc of power begins with surrender and release. Again, we make room for ourselves by letting go in layers over time. We can't just let go. It doesn't just happen in a couple weeks or a couple months or a weekend or under one magical full moon, right? Letting go of all the things that we've piled on top of our truth and seeing and knowing ourselves clearly, that takes time. There's a lot of programming and conditioning to work through. And even Another thing is you learn to prioritize, as I mentioned earlier, what's obvious, because it's easy to get addicted to digging and excavating for something that's wrong or something to heal, rather than moving forward and integrating from what you just released and trusting that if something needs to be worked on, it'll come up. That's one great way to apply trust, to stop being so, I don't want to use the word addicted because it's not accurate. And I don't want to discredit or water down anyone's truthful experience with addiction. Maybe more, some people make it a little bit obsessive with the healing. Like there's always something else. There's always something more. I got to look. What else? What else? What else? Rather than just trusting, okay, well, that was really obvious. So I worked on that. There's nothing super obvious in this moment. So I'm just going to be. And then when something else presents itself, I'll handle it. So letting go does not have to escalate to become a form of escapism when we are able to leave the past in the past and move forward. So receptivity, the last piece, is about being able to receive all kinds of things: love, honor, respect, grace, generosity, help. Oh my goodness, help, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you're not saying birds of a feather flock together. If you're listening to this podcast, there are probably some areas in your life where you do way too much. It's just how we are. We overfunction. We do it. We can get great at, listen, I'm much better at this than I've ever been before in my life. There's still areas in my life and on the deeper internal layers where I'm doing way too much and I catch myself all the time. So receptivity is about learning how to receive. And part of receiving is about learning how to ask, which makes people very uncomfortable, which is why we have to do surrender and release and trust before we get to receptivity, because that takes so much guts to ask, to admit. Some people have really been programmed that they shouldn't need anyone, and that's absurd. We're humans. We're literally built to need each other. We absolutely need each other. We need people. In the simplest way, sometimes we just need someone to hold a door for us because we don't have a third hand. So when it comes to receptivity, it's about being open to receiving whatever it is you need any given moment. It's about learning how to ask. It's about processing all of the feelings and all of the emotions. Like some of you right now just listening are probably going, oh my goodness, I know I need to do this. I'm not great at this. Or some of you might even be thinking, I'm awful at this, right? Because for some people, they learned a protection mechanism to just do everything yourself. If I don't need anyone, no one can hurt me. Y'all, people are going to hurt you anyway. None of us escape this life not being hurt. So, when I look at all the things we all do sometimes to avoid pain and discomfort, what we're also avoiding is love, connection, being met, wonder, awe, like the miraculousness of the human spirit and generosity. And it comes back to what we were talking about, the gifts and talents too. Because listen, if you're someone that's trying to do everything yourself, you might have enormous gifts and talents, but guess what's on the other side of gifts and talents? There's also tons of stuff that you're really not good at. There's so many things that I'm not good at. This is one area, especially running a business, you really learn this. There's so many things that I'm not good at that I absolutely can't do myself if this business is going to run. So I've had to learn. It's not even humbling. It's a freaking relief to be like, oh no, I stink at that. Let's hire someone who's great at it. And that's what's amazing about like the harmony of like connection and being part of a collective. For everything that you are absolutely miserable at, there is someone that is great at it. For everything that you hate doing, someone loves doing it. Let me tell you something. My mom loves doing laundry and dishes. I hate doing laundry and dishes. For years when I was younger, when I would go home, my mom would want to do my laundry. And I could have been like, I'm an adult, I could do my own laundry. But I'm like, I hate it. And it brings this woman so much joy. Yeah, like, please fold my clothes. Thanks, Mom. Like she loves it. Why would I deny her that? So part of receptivity is also like this collective honoring of the things that we're great at and the things that we're not great at, where we want to be generous, where we can't be generous for whatever reason. all of our amazing expansiveness and power, and then also our limitations, because we all have both. So when we get into receptivity, one of the things about receptivity is also reciprocity, because, a lot of people really pride themselves on being givers and nurturers and what you do for others because it feels good. Well, guess what, y'all? If you don't let other people do things for you, the people in your life don't get to share in that feeling good as well. People want to give to you. Think about even like random acts of kindness that you do. Why do you do it? It freaking feels good. It's not just to be kind. It also is because you can walk away from the interaction feeling like, yes, I helped someone today. I did something nice. You don't need to go posting on social media all about it. That kind of like takes away from and detracts the intention, right? And breaks the energy a little bit. But we really do need each other. And reciprocity, see, here's a cool thing about developing discernment and learning embodiment practices, learning to speak your body's unique language of the senses. When you really get tuned in to speaking your body's unique language of the senses, especially for those of you who identify as empaths, you can really use that skill to feel into the deeper layers of things, which helps you to more accurately measure what is reciprocity. Because reciprocity isn't tit for tat, right? Because we're different. Let me give you an example. I personally am not a gifts person, right? That's not my love language. So when someone gives me a gift, I think it's like very, very thoughtful. And I'm always like blown away by how thoughtful and caring some people are through their gift giving. But my expression of love is not going to come through a gift, right? So if someone needs a gift, they might not feel like my love is reciprocal. My expression of love will be, I'm going to show up for you when you need it. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be the person who, when you're having an awful moment and you're judging yourself, is not going to judge you. I'm going to show you that you're worthy of love anyway. Like, that's how I express love, right? Is it better than a gift? No, right? It's just different expression. So, I have a dear friend who, whenever she visits, she's like, I'm your guest. I'm buying your dinner. Great. Like, she stays in my place sometimes when I'm traveling and she passes through. She always leaves me little gifts. It's a beautiful thing, right? I'm not really a gift giver. I'm rarely like getting her any kind of gift. But the way that I'm here for her in friendship, the way that she knows when she's in some of her most awful moments, I'm the one to call. That's where our reciprocity happens. Cool. So that's just like one tiny example. So reciprocity is about the energetic exchange, right? It's about feeling met. It's about feeling like that back and forth is always, it's flowing. It's never like too much in one direction and never enough in the other direction, right? Because listen, seasons and cycles and phases of life are a thing. So there might be times when we are more there for someone than they can be there for us. Like I have a handful of friends right now, actually, who have had big deaths in their families. And I'm going to be there for them more during this initial phase in their fresh grief than I would ever expect that they would be there for me right now, because they don't have the capacity. They have a big thing that they're feeling through, and that's fine with me because these are my dear friends, and these are the phases, right? There were phases when I needed more care and love when I was doing some of my trauma healing in the last 3 years when they were really there for me, right? And so part of reciprocity and part of receptivity, rather, is receiving that love without guilt, without keeping track of it, without feeling like, oh, I have to remember that this person did this for me so I can do it back for them at some point. Like it just flows. Receptivity helps you to be in better flow and energetic exchange in your relationships. So that's what I wanted to share with you today about the first half of the Arc of Power, why it's important to have a container and a guide, like a direction and a place to focus your healing and growth on rather than just jumping around all over the place, that moves in a direction that builds on itself. Really, 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 really helps. So, and to wrap up the episode, for anyone who is interested in joining Power 2020, enrollment is open through January 3rd. And I know some of you are really feeling into it. I've been getting some notes from people. I have different pop-up bonuses going on every weekend. So it's always good to take a little extra time on the weekends to see, like, am I ready to make my decision? Because there's some cool stuff that you can get when you join on certain dates. So I have a couple of interviews with alumni that I wanted to include here on the end of the episode for those of you who are feeling into whether or not you want to join Power. So you can just get some different perspective than just hearing me talk about it, because obviously it's my work. I'm extremely biased. I'm obsessed with it, or I wouldn't be doing it. But it's always cool to hear from other people how it went for them. So have a listen to those things. If you are interested in Power 2020, go over and check it out at wildsoulmovement.com/Power 2020. Next week for episode 5 of the journey, we are going to be getting into the second half, the expansion half of the Arc of Power, which is passion and purpose and love and truth. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're in the Facebook group for the Journey into the Wild Soul, pop in. Let me know what you thought and what came up for you. You're also always more than welcome to share the episodes. Find me on Instagram, send me a DM, or you can email us at hello@wildsoulmovement.com. All right, y'all. I wanted to add a little segment here onto the end of the show to share with you some clips from some of the Power 2019 interviews that I was doing with our current members who are about to wrap up their year, especially for those of you who are thinking about joining for Power 2020, just to give you some people's like real unfiltered feedback, shares, things about why they joined, why a year, what was compelling, what were some of their challenges. I will end all of the episodes for the next 3 weeks with these. So here's just a couple of clips today. Our first one here is Nicole Ayers. And what's really amazing is, we're doing this on video. And as Nicole came up and popped up on the screen here, she showed me her wall in the background. She has a whole freaking power wall, y'all. That is one of the things that we do is the mantra for every month. And we have a different mantra all 12 months of the year. I make a little graphic so people can make it the background on their phone or on their computer. And a lot of people, when they come to workshops, they show me their phone with like our mantra on it. But Nicole printed them out. And then what she also has up there, for people who are looking for a deeper, more spiritual experience, I also write a prayer for us every month. So not everyone is up for that part of it, but for the people who are. I'm so glad to see your wall.
Yeah. I love it. It's actually really cool. I have 2 daughters. They're 9 and 11, and they're always in and out of my space. And this has been a little journey for them too, to watch me empower. But it was really cool. The other day, my daughter came in and she was just sitting here because this is my workspace too. And she was like spinning in the chair, and she was like, "You've been doing that for a long time. I didn't realize it was that long." And I was like, yeah, it's been a whole year. So it's kind of cool. Just that visual for them to see the way to take good care of yourself or myself.
On a journey. I love it.
You talked about, you announced you're going to be doing Power. And I was like, oh, I really want in on that. And I was already trying to talk myself out of it, at the same time though. And I chose a word for like this year. I'd already started thinking about like, what's my word going to be? And I chose the word power. And then you announced that it was called the Arc of Power. And I was like, well, okay.
Well, all right. Can't make that up.
Yeah. So you can't make it up. And it was just time. It was time to step into my own power. And this was just such a really beautiful platform and safe way to do it, without it being too much at one time.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I have so many different aspects to the experience that people can engage with, of course, with the movement and the embodiment work being the anchor, is so it doesn't have to feel like too much for people. Yeah. And it's funny because as I was reading through people's feedback forms, a couple of people had said, sometimes people sign up for programs or courses and there's just so much. Much. And that gives people that like paradox of choice. So, I'm glad that you were able to engage with it in a way that was super digestible for you.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's what's been really transformative for me is that it's deceptively simple, right? Like that was one of my deals. If I sign up, I'm going to commit and really do this, I'm going to stick and do this program. And I was like, okay, it's a movement, it's a prayer, it's a mantra, there's some journaling. Like I can totally do that. Those are all little things I was kind of doing here and there anyway. And so I was like, oh, I've totally got this. I can do it. And so it felt really simple.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's anything but simple, right? It's so complex. Like the work that happens there is so awesome.
And now we're going to hear from Reina Carcio. You've been with me for a pretty long time. What was your first year that you did Wild Soul Movement?
2015, I think.
2015. And so why did you join up again this year?
Basically the first time that you said, hey, I'm going to do a year-long program, I was like, oh yeah, I'm all in for that. Because I've been recycling through like the old videos and the Patreon, when you had some of the Patreon videos. And it was just like medicine. I had a lot of disconnection from, I don't want to, maybe it's workout trauma.
Yeah.
And it was just the thing that I did instead to kind of heal a lot of that stuff during that time. So it's like new content. Yay.
And you weren't intimidated at all by the year? Because actually, as I've been catching up with some people, some folks are saying like, yeah, I wasn't sure about committing to a year. So what was it about a year that made you be like, yes, I'm in for that?
I've done every 12-week program you could possibly imagine. And there's only so much you can do in 7 or 12 weeks. And totally. I was ready for something that gave me more space, for more time to really make progress. And there were places in the past that I knew I kind of quit on it.
Yeah.
Where when you're in there a whole month and you keep poking, like, how's it going?
Well, and that was one of the things that made me want to make it a year, because I knew that. All right, next week, I will share some more clips from our alumni with you so you can get a little insider scoop and look at what it might be like, why people join, what people get out of it. As well, if you head on over to wildsoulmovement.com/power2020, there are some other alumni interviews from previous years up on the page over there. If you have any questions about Power 2020, we're a couple weeks away here. Enrollment ends on January 3rd. So I know some of you are probably still mulling it over. You're always welcome to reach out to me in my DMs on Instagram, or you can email us at hello@wildsoulmovement.com. We have some more pop-up bonuses coming up this coming weekend. When you join Power between December 20th and 22nd, you will get access to the Rituals and Practices bonus. And what's in that bonus is the entire Wild Soul Toolkit, which if you want to know what's in there, go to wildsoulmovement.com/toolkit. And access to monthly moon circles that we do all throughout the year. So I did this year in Power 2019. It was super fun. For either the new moon or the full moon, we do a little ritual, a little ceremony together. Sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's an audio, sometimes it's a practice written out for you. So if you're someone who digs energetic practices, rituals, ceremonies, learning about infusing energy into various projects and things in your life, even down to things like your food and helping you figure out what you want to eat and what would feel most nourishing for your body, this Rituals and Practices bonus might be something you really love. So again, that's available when you join specifically between December 20th and 22nd. And again, you can enroll at wildsoulmovement.com/power2020. And the last thing I want to mention, if you haven't seen it already, there is an application on that page for something that I call Gather Up pricing. The term gather up comes from some inspiration I received many years ago in a, what's the best thing to call this? We're going to call this in the form of an answered prayer, where I was really tuning into the deeper intentions and the purposes behind this Wild Soul Movement work that I do. And one of the things that was just very resounding for me is that part of the purpose of this is to gather up the wild souls all over the planet. Not only to do this work on themselves individually, but to connect and to create a community and to have a space where people can feel like they belong, and also where people can feel, seen and heard. And, no space is a perfectly safe space, but to really create something as safe as possible, where, of course, if or when we ever mess something up, we are also able to repair and move on together. So that's what we've really created. And so the term gather up comes from that deep desire, and part of the purpose being to gather up women from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, countries, experiences, identities, across the board, super diverse in all kinds of ways. And one of those ways that I acknowledge is just that not everyone is in the same economic position to make a full investment in the program. So gather up pricing is something that you can apply for if you would love to join Power 2020, and the full price just is out of your reach for whatever reason right now. No shame in that around here. Head on over to wildsmovement.com/power 2020. On that page, if you click anywhere it says join now, it'll put you down by the payment buttons, and under the payment buttons, you'll see where the link is to apply for the gather up pricing, which is a 50% off rate. I have plenty of space in the program this year for people to take me up on that. Last year, we had tons of people take me up on that. It really is my pleasure to offer that. So if that is something that would really help you be able to not put this off and join us for this coming year, absolutely apply for that. All right, y'all, have an absolutely amazing week, and we'll be back next week for episode 5 of the Journey into the Wild Soul. That's having a yes-no truth practice, which again is the anchor, the real root of the difference between judgment and discernment. When we're judging, we're just in our heads. We're disconnected from the wisdom of the body. Discernment brings in the body's wisdom. It allows us to feel for what's real and what's true, as opposed to only just thinking about it or analyzing it, or making pros and cons lists, or trying to be rational about something, because the rational choice is not always the best choice.